Welcome to Food Travel Talk TV, a brand new monthly talk show brought to you by the World Food Travel Association, the world's leading authority on food and beverage tourism. Food Travel Talk TV is a talk show created by and for the world's culinary travel trade industry. The show's goal is to inspire us all with ways to help us do business better. Each month, we invite industry thought leaders, opinion makers, and trendsetters to discuss important topics for our industry's benefit. I'm Eric Wolf, and I'll be your host today for our April 2020 episode. This month's topic is the pandemic's future possible effect on overtourism in popular food and beverage destinations. And I'd like to introduce our guest speakers. Claudia Vecchio, President and CEO of Sonoma County Tourism in California, USA. Luisa
Morning.
Puppo, culinary journalist, Ligucibario, Genoa, Italy.
Ciao.
Robin Shaw, marketing consultant, Wine Tourism Australia.
Good evening, everybody.
And Rob Holmes, founder of GLP Films in the USA, and we're still waiting on Rob to join us. Before we get started, we'd like to remind everyone except the speakers to keep yourselves muted, please. And we'll also take questions only via chat. You can find the chat window in the lower control bar of the Zoom window. Feel free to post your questions at any time. Now, before we get started, I'd like to set the tone for today's episode. We live in unprecedented times. Some people are even wondering how tourism can come back after everything that's happened. We wonder when we'll be able to visit our favorite culinary destinations again to enjoy pasta in Bologna, Italy, sip wines in California, munch on noodles in Singapore, or sink our teeth into barbecue in Argentina. These destinations are not near each other, and in fact, one of the joys of being a culinary traveler is the freedom to roam the world looking for our next meal. Great food and drink can be enjoyed locally as well, and a few people have written that when the pandemic abates and people start traveling again, they think that initially people will travel locally or within a short distance from home. When it's all over, how do you think the pandemic will have affected the popularity of major food and beverage destinations, including Barcelona, San Francisco, Florence, and Paris? And these are cities that have also suffered from tremendous issues with over-tourism over the years. Let's start with Claudia. What do you think the future holds?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me as part of this group. We are certainly living in unprecedented times, and as a tourism industry in the U.S. and across the world, we are facing issues that we never dreamt that we would have to face. So, the way we're looking at this, not unlike a major natural disaster, which we know a little bit about in Sonoma County, and so do others here certainly. But we're making decisions that are going to impact us and the industry for many years to come. It's not just a short-term turnaround here. We're contending with pressures on the industry like we've never seen before, and I'm sure you're all experiencing that same thing wherever you are. But I think the future for culinary is really very bright. If you look at all the segments that we kind of track in the tourism industry, this sense of getting a sense of place, which I know is kind of overused, but that idea, and certainly we know people are consuming wine during this for good reasons, and they're going to want to consume a lot of wine when this is over. As a wine destination, I think that's also really beneficial for Sonoma County. We are right next to, just north of San Francisco, and certainly understand the issues around the culinary industry there, and our restaurants, which are so under pressure. Many of them, of course, small businesses and trying to survive during this time. And they've done some creative things, which I'm sure we'll talk about and have seen around the world, but just really ways to survive and ways to keep engagement with customers during this time. But I think long term, from both the major cities, which have issues around being crowded spaces, to the culinary and wine piece in a rural destination like Sonoma County, people are still going to love that experience, and they're going to find ways to find it locally, and within what we're now calling that near-cation drive destination kind of a situation. So I think there's much reason for hope, but we do have to get through a number of issues not the least of which is finding ways for people to interact with each other once this is all done.
Luisa, what do you think? You're in the thick of it all, right there, and right in coronavirus central.
Yeah.
What do you think is the prognosis for food lovers coming back to Italy?
Well, first, let me thank you again, Eric, and WFTA for this invitation as a guest speaker today. Well, what I can share with you is my most recent experience. I have just ended another conference at the local level with our mayor and other representatives and stakeholders of the sectors. Well, of all the segments in the tourism industry, the outlook here is that the food and beverage segment is the one which will be, not to say the least affected, but which will also have the opportunity to have some kind of growth, even though this troublesome season is so uncertain and we don't know what will happen tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. But the outlook here is that for sure that for cities and for overcrowded destinations, I think you all know the Cinque Terre, the 5 villages, which are usually packed with people up to their the level is of not being sustainable at all. Well, for this kind of destinations, there will be a slower, growth, but especially for rural areas, this will be, in a way, a kind of moment of opportunity, provided that logistic issues as well as training issues, which is the uttermost feature, and also their branding as a tourist destination, food and beverage destination will be taken into account. So the times are very difficult. Restaurants and all the HoReCa sector is under pressure. But I think that for the producers as well as for the farmers and for the experience providers, especially in rural areas, this will prove to be a new growth, a new start, or a brave new start.
Interesting. I like that. Robin, let's hear from Australia. What do you think?
Hi, Eric. Lovely to be on the call tonight. And hello, everybody. A little bit later over here, but I managed to stay awake and stay off the wine
Thank
tonight,
you for
which
that,
was
Robin.
probably a good idea. Probably as many of you are aware, in Australia, we had a pretty horrendous summer here with drought, bushfires, floods, of course. We had the whole catastrophe. And just as we were recovering from that, of course, the COVID-19 crisis hit and we closed our international borders. In terms of our what's going to happen in the future here, well, it's kind of anyone's guess, but as the many forums that I'm participating in at the moment in the tourism industry, there seems to be a sense that Australia will probably remain closed to international visitors for quite some time yet, I would imagine. Domestically, we're also pretty closed up right now too. So there's going to be a focus, I think, on intrastate travel first. And we saw this, interestingly enough, here in South Australia, where I'm from, on the back of the bushfires here that started in December and through January. We saw a bit of a recovery of really hyper-local tourism after that, where people from the City of Adelaide really wanted to support the local areas and the local businesses. And we saw this around the country as well. I suspect we'll see a similar reaction once everybody's allowed to travel again, and we'll see people starting to emerge and support their local businesses as much as possible. Of course, in a food and beverage sense, we've seen the wineries have to close their doors, as they have everywhere around the world, of course, the restaurants, the hotels, and I think there'll be a major pent-up demand for people to want to get out and support those businesses, and especially from a gastronomic perspective. I think things will be a little bit different though. I suspect for a while people are going to be quite cautious about proximity especially, and that's potentially going to have a bit of an effect in terms of the way we as food and beverage businesses choose to conduct ourselves. I think there's just going to be that level of caution for a while. In Australia, of course, we'll be moving into our winter months, So we'll have that period of time where people are worried about public health from a different perspective. In the long term, I think we'll bounce back quite well, but I think tourism overall is going to be quite a bit different to the way we've seen it. And with any luck, over-tourism in some of these places that have been so badly affected over the last decade or two might actually see a reprieve, and we'll see some emerging regions come to the fore.
Do you think that food-loving travelers are going to avoid the super popular food-forward cities like Barcelona and San Francisco in favor of more rural destinations?
Personally, yes, I think they will. We already saw a little bit of that, I think, happening, and certainly in Australia, there is a real desire to get out into the regions and discover the regional produce, that provenance where things are from, which is absolutely fantastic. And quite quickly, as things sort of shut down here in Australia, we really did see Australians deserting those really crowded areas, like, well, initially places like Chinatown, for example, and the big markets in some places. In Australia, we know that Australians are going to support Australia first before they go off to international cities. So I think we'll see that real localism before people head off to those major places again.
Well, to sum up what I already said before, yes, for sure. In Italy, of course, forecasts are for a reprise of domestic tourism, but especially regional tourism. And so let's say 2 or 3 hours drive, and also day trippers, daily excursions as well. And food, yes, it will have a major role in the exploration of new, so to say, areas, the places where produce and products come from, of course. And I think that cities and more crowded places will be shunned for a while, of course, in terms of, fear of problems, safety issues, and health and social distancing, etc. So I think, yes, it will be the time for some. We already have, not only in Tuscany or Puglia or other regions, but even in my region as well, Liguria, best practices. Little villages which have already started a path, let's say, as the Ligurian capital of craft beer, which is Sassello. That they are already working on this kind of path, and regional parks. Some regional parks are doing a great job on that. And also we are working a lot on, we have changed, so to say, the process, the path of some European funded project to adapt to these new circumstances, so that all these entrepreneurs from inner areas will be supported in the building and planning and delivering of experiences as well.
Claudia, what's the sentiment in California? Because you're already in a very, very popular tourist destination anyway. So what do you think is going to be happening for you?
Well, I agree 100% with what they both have said. I would just kind of add, possibly from our standpoint, we are already seeing people who aren't supposed to be out and about sort of flocking, if you will, to our parks and to the coastline. And, they're sort of taking this social distancing and not abiding by it like they should. So we know that once this whole thing is behind us, that they will come out and come into Sonoma County, where we have the coast and it's rural, and it has all of that. The other thing I would say is that it's the food experiences in San Francisco are spectacular, but they're also incredibly expensive. And I think people are going to come out of this with, really being very cautious about where they spend their money. And this sort of more creative and value-driven culinary experiences that can be had outside of the cities, I think will also be very attractive to people as they're really trying to, save their money as they can, but still have these extraordinary experiences. So I think they'll take that into consideration a little bit.
I think that's a great point, Claudia, and certainly from a wine industry perspective, we're really seeing that the idea of premiumisation, which as an industry we've been working towards for many, many years, is pretty much dead in the water. People are trading down in terms of the price point at which they're prepared to buy their wine. We're certainly seeing this with some of the luxury end of town. Champagne sales are being hit really hard. And this could have quite a knock-on effect for some time as people, their wallets are a little bit tighter than they were before. And we probably will find that people will be looking still for quality, but they'll be looking for quality at those lower price points. So value and the value proposition that we give is going to be absolutely really important, more so than it ever has been.
That's a really good point. I like that. Do you think that food and drink will continue to be drivers in the short term for this more local and regional tourism, or do you think that it will just be tourism in general, that people want to go sightseeing or do outdoor recreation? Do you think the food and beverage are going to be as important to people when they come out of this?
I certainly would say yes. And people are going to want to celebrate coming out of this. I mean, this has been a long haul for a lot of people, and there's no better way to celebrate and to smile and to join with friends and family and those people that they've been kept away from for so long than with food and drink. And so I think that it's just that sense of normalcy, the things that people just in everyone's DNA that they love. And I really think that it's the psychological benefits of the culinary and beverage side of tourism. People are going to love that because of the celebratory kind of way that experience permeates in people's lives.
100% agree with Claudia, and I would, so yes, the feeling of getting away from it all, we have to celebrate. And furthermore, during this lockdown period, what we are surveying now in Italy, and not only in Italy, is that lots of people who are forced to stay home have started to bake a lot, yes, to cook a lot. The flour and yeast issue is worldwide, and everybody is learning how to prepare sourdough at home because they're more precious than gold now. But baking, not only baking, cooking, and taking more interest in food. So this is a good opportunity as well for food education, which we do need. So good first quality ingredients, but not necessarily expensive ingredients. So let's go back to what good produce is: fruit, vegetables. Let's go to the place where they are grown. Let's go buy them at the farm, etc., and buy our extra virgin olive oil in place. And this will be for sure another part of the positive effect of this.
Luisa, that's a terrific point. We're seeing that in Australia as well. Just behind the run on toilet paper, which I believe has been happening everywhere. My goodness. The next thing to happen here, of course, was there was a run on pasta and rice and tin tomatoes, and then chickens, as in live chickens. So now we've got people in suburbia with chicken coops in their backyards. And then the nurseries had a run on seedlings of all sorts of vegetables and things like that. So there's certainly been an interest in people becoming potentially more self-sufficient, but also how can they use produce more effectively at home. Of course, children are also at home being homeschooled now. So keeping them occupied, interested. We're seeing that people are starting to cook together at home. There's potentially likely to be more interest, as you said, Luisa, in education around cooking, so perhaps cooking schools. We're seeing virtual cooking schools at the moment, you know, how to use the last things that are left in your cupboard, those sorts of things, as well as the more intricate types of cooking. So I think that's going to be something that could drive interest in the future for us, especially at regional level, where there will be a lot more interest. I think that'll be great.
Okay, so let's fast forward a year or year and a half. Let's say that everything is, the virus is gone, or there's a vaccine, and now people are wanting to travel more, and that means obviously getting on an airplane. But some of the things that I've been reading indicate that airlines are actually going to be the biggest hindrance to getting long haul travel back. And as you know, those are the gateway cities. So those are those big over tourism cities that people have to fly into to get to those rural areas anyway. But people are saying that the airlines are going to need to raise their prices, that all the specials and deals are going to go away, that they're going to cut back on services and amenities and just to make up their financial losses. So what do you think is going to happen with air travel and the challenge then when people are coming back into those gateway cities? Are they still going to want rural?
That's a big question. The airlines, you know, they're sort of, at least in the U.S., and I know they are very different around the world, but you know, they consider themselves transportation rather than tourism industry. So, and they're currently in the U.S. kind of grappling with the government about the bailout and what kind of funding they're going to get and all of that. At least the U.S. carriers have not yet offered refunds to people, so I don't really see their financial situation as being as dire and long term as it might be if they were really giving refunds for all the flights that had been canceled during this time. But you know, I think getting on an airplane is definitely going to be, and probably 18 months from now, we'll have good stories of people who have successfully taken long haul flights and have been perfectly fine. And so I think if we're looking that far into the future, there will be a you know, a pretty high confidence level, and people will come in, and there's probably some sense that in 18 months, if there's a vaccine, that things will go back to sort of normalized. And if they come into San Francisco, come into LA, or any of our gateway cities on the West Coast, that their travel patterns might look very much like they did 3, 4, 5 months ago. So at that point, hopefully, it's dependent on us in rural areas to have built our brand, as was discussed, and to really build that compelling reason to get out of the gateway cities and come up to see us. So, you know, I think our story might be have changed, but it will be, I would think, kind of similar to where it has been in the past.
So would you say then that rural destinations have kind of a unique opportunity in the next several months to really strengthen their brands considerably?
I think that's absolutely true. And unfortunately, we don't have any money to do that, but through you know, the low cost types of marketing, I think it's really imperative that we take this opportunity to solidify our brands and to talk with people in a way we haven't been able to before. So we're definitely looking at our recovery strategy and how we do just that.
Well, that was quite a tough one as a question, Eric, really a tough one. What I can say from my point of view, of my local point of view, or regional point of view, is that the first thing the city of Genoa will be working on as regards its image and branding is that of a safe city, which is safe throughout all along the tourism chain, the supply chain, from hotels and accommodation and restaurants and all the things you can think of and experiences. And of course, the airline sector as well as the cruise sector will definitely have hard times. Today we had this call with managers from Costa Crociere as well as from other vessel lines, and they are really troubled about that. But in the meantime, we do have the opportunity of working long term in starting now in establishing and rebuilding our image, our branding, and our message. But first of all, our contents. In a way we have never done before. So it's a brand new start. It's not just you know, trying to revamp something. It's a brand new start. It's anno zero, year zero, so to say, from scratch.
So Eric, I'm consulting my my crystal ball here to answer that question,
say,
because
Robin?
that's what's required. Well, let's have a little look. Aviation, of course, is taking a hit all around the world. Australia, of course, is a long-haul destination from pretty much everywhere. In Australia, they're certainly looking at galvanising the domestic market first. The Tourism Australia is working for the first time on domestic marketing campaigns to ensure that we can keep afloat domestically. So there's still nothing like Australia campaigns, those sorts of things, which will then, of course, roll out to an international audience as things begin to open up. Our two major airlines here, one of them, Qantas, which we all know and love, is likely to fare reasonably well and come out the other side of this okay. Virgin Australia, Virgin Atlantic is probably in a bit of trouble. So we're not sure how that's going to play out in terms of the liquidity of those airlines, and for passengers who, of course, have had their fares and the routes interrupted. It's been pretty good here in terms of the ability to get refunds or to put things into credit for the long term. So they've responded fairly well on the local front, which is quite pleasing. Coming into the gateway cities and dispersing is a challenge in ordinary times, as it will be in the future. I think there's going to be a whole lot of competition all around the world as marketing agencies, tourism marketing agencies, Claudia, yours as well, thinking about how to get that edge over other destinations to try and bring people to those areas. Those that are on the front foot now and working with the local markets will probably be the ones to be the first movers, I would think, into the future. And the other thing I think is important to know, of course, as well, is there are so many people unemployed. So those that would normally go to, from Australia, the short haul destinations such as Bali, Indonesia, Thailand, they're likely to be quite constrained and potentially looking much more locally. So I can see the drive market increasing, and that will certainly benefit our regions here in Australia. Internationally, it will be different. There won't be those, big family holidays that people take in the middle of the year for 3 weeks to Europe and skiing in Aspen and Whistler and things like that. That could be off the cards for a little while. The other thing also in terms of the over-tourism impact is cruise ships. Cruise ships, of course, do cause a lot of the over-tourism in several of these places that Eric, you mentioned earlier. And cruise is likely to take a very, very big hit, especially the larger cruise ships, as confidence in those floating petri dishes, as we call them here, it needs to be re-evaluated. So that could also have an effect, and air travel may actually benefit from the fact that people don't want to jump on a ship for a different reason. So no way to tell which way that the cards will fall there.
So
but
to be in a smaller flying petri dish as opposed to a larger stationary, more slower moving petri dish.
Well, actually, the airlines, it's not too bad on planes when you really dig into the research. It is a lot safer. The air on a plane is a lot safer in a lot of ways than on a cruise ship. So, yeah, it is interesting how people's perceptions will be.
Let me throw this one out there. What do you think the prognosis is going to be for food and wine and beer tour companies? Now, keep in mind that a lot of these companies are working in cities anyway. The big popular destinations that we can all name. And the idea of having a multi-day culinary tour is not that common. There are companies that do them, but there are not that many of them. And if people are going to be staying local and regional anyway, they may already know the places to go, so wouldn't necessarily be likely to book a tour. So what do you think the prognosis is for those culinary tour companies that typically have been focusing on urban tours?
Look, I'm on a number of forums with tour operators, not just culinary tourism operators, but different types of tour operators around the world. And they've been hit really, really hard, of course, by cancellations at the moment. So first up, let's hope that there's plenty still there at the other end of those that already exist. There will certainly be a demand, I think, for all kinds of tours in the future, especially around food and beverage. Eric, as you say, there's not necessarily a lot of multi-day culinary tourism, culinary tour operators out there. However, what we're certainly working on in Australia is out in our regions, in our wine regions, we are looking at those multi-day itineraries which incorporate visiting a winery, visiting a brewery, a dining experience, a farmer's market experience, also coupled in with some soft adventure and things like that, so that you can actually have people want to come and stay in a region for more and different things to do. I think we might even see an uptick in family travel and intergenerational travel, which there had already been a trend, excuse me, towards that. And I think we'll probably see a bit more of that happening as well. I mean, if people are not going to get on cruise ships, what are they going to do? And what is it that's appealing about going on a cruise ship? And for a lot of them, it's that ability to have international dining at their fingertips. So the ability for people to still be able to experience that at a more local level in the capital cities and out in the regions, I think there's a great opportunity there for us to reposition things and offer a value proposition that perhaps wasn't there before.
I do agree with you, Robin. What I would like to put a little focus on furthermore is the fact that now in this troublesome stage, what should be done also is working on the virtual tourism side of the matter, on the first phases of the customer journey. So trying, if for sure there are important or relevant or interesting venues and resources which could be exploited, trying to get them known throughout the web, get them know, because people now are traveling not to go, I want to travel because I want to go to this place or that. It is also firstly a matter of satisfying your own expectations and desires and motivations. So this is the most important and challenging but interesting side of the matter now, trying to focus on your targets, needs and wants, and feasibility in terms of also of money, because I think that all the world will have to cut down on expenses in the next years, and travel of course is encompassed. But what I say, so new needs, changing needs, changing ways of traveling, for sure, cross-generational travel. Why not at regional level, national level, and trying to build up new offers which can offer something interesting to all the different segments of the package. And it will take a lot of training and retraining, training of trainers. This is something which I cannot insist enough.
Yeah, I agree 100% with both Luisa and Robin. We're seeing some creative ways that tour operators are engaging people virtually and setting up virtual tours and ways to collect their, they have fans that are have taken many tours with them, so they're sort of creating these online communities and continuing to engage with their customers throughout this time. There really are, from a training standpoint, you're 100% right. I think they're going to need to, because if it's a bike tour, or if it's even if it's a small motor coach tour, if it's something that uses equipment, to make sure that equipment, people feel comfortable with the equipment or with whatever they're doing, that they're not the fourth person in line to use that particular bike. And so I think it's really they're going to need to be very focused on ensuring safety of their customers and making sure that they do communicate that. But just as Robin said, we're just hoping like heck that some of these really unique and wonderful and that create these bespoke experiences, that they are still with us on the other side. And I wish we could help them more, but we can certainly help by building the brand and providing a platform for them to do their great work.
As for the training needs, I work as a project designer and trainer. This is my job. It has been that for 25 years with tourism businesses. I think, yes, for sure, training to deliver the right message in terms of safety, compliance, of course, and also now in terms of digital storytelling and contents to be provided, contents to be shared. Apart from, and it is interesting, of course, trying to keep in touch with recipes, etc. But now this is the moment also to deliver contents related to the food history of a place, the genius loci, the spirit of the place, all the sense of the place we were talking about before. That's it, for sure, and cross-cultural issues as well. And as regards my country, which is Italy, let me say also a bit, it has to be done still as for the foreign languages. Specific, I mean, micro languages and food and wine English as well, and dealing with allergies and intolerances in Italian or in English as well. Well, this is the moment to work on that as well.
Yeah, they're great points. And Claudia, just on the virtual side of things, obviously we're all being inundated at the moment with opportunities to participate in webinars and training and virtual tours of all sorts of things. And this is really the time for people to use that content and the imagery and the virtual tours to build desire and build interest among the audience for the future. I'm following some wonderful tours in Africa, where of course people can't go on safari, but the guides are still there and the animals are still there, so they're taking us on virtual safaris. And for someone like me, that just simply builds my desire to want to go again in the future. So if that's done well by regions and by individual operators, and of course food is so beautifully visual as well, I think there's a really good opportunity for savvy operators to get ahead of the curve and have that desire to travel to those places already in place when the borders do finally open up and everybody is comfortable and willing to go global. And just picking up on, we talk about the safety aspects and the perceptions of public health and safety once we do open everything up again. There's also the issue of sustainability. One of the things, of course, that people are seeing right now around the world is animals and plants returning to places that have been overrun by humans. And of course, we're seeing a lack of pollution in so many areas. People may be more inclined to think more carefully about long haul travel, which can be a problem for those of us in long haul destinations like Australia, of course. But it is something we need to be aware of because it could have quite a profound effect on people's desire to go a long way from home.
I want to bring back the topic of virtual reality and virtual tours and even online gamification. A lot of us have seen some of these walkthroughs of museums in places like Amsterdam and so on, where if you can't travel, so we're going to walk you through that museum. And Robin, you were talking about some virtual tours in Africa where the guides are still taking you on safaris. Okay, those are nice, but if the bigger destinations, those ones that have a higher propensity to over tourism, have arguably more money to work with and arguably a bigger technical base on which to draw, do you think that those bigger destinations are going to have an unfair advantage in terms of releasing a lot of these virtual and gamification type experiences? Do you think the smaller rural destinations need to get their act together, or what do you think is going to happen with these new kinds of technologies in different food and beverage tourism destinations?
Well, bigger destinations, the richer destinations, so to say, of course, they can have more money. Of course, they can work with more ease at the delivery and the planning and delivery of this kind of virtual experiences. Nevertheless, they will be facing a huge issue, which is to rethink, in my opinion, to totally rethink their business model or their development model, which is so they will have a double effort to be done. Yes, they will be delivering contents for sure, maybe virtual reality tours, etc., but they will have to deal with the fact that they will have to totally change their development model from think of all the articles probably you have read about Venice, how to limit massive access to Venice. Okay, this is a very sustainable issue for sure, and now they will have to work on that for sure. What, yes, smaller destination, the new buds, so to say, will need more support in terms of resources. Yes, not only money, but I think professional resources, especially people, professionals, able to help them find their way throughout this maze of opportunities, which is really is a maze, because first of all you have to choose your target, and then you have to build everything according to that. Instead, now it is just, we are worried, we are troubled, we don't know where to go, and let's shoot a video. Why?
Claudia, what do you think? You're just
Yeah.
north of the world's largest concentration of technical expertise on the
Yeah.
planet.
Yes,
What do you
we
think?
are.
Yeah.
Well, I've always thought that great creative doesn't take money. It just takes a really great idea and some scrappy thinking. And I don't necessarily know that a lot of money and tech prowess gets you a better product. And we've done a number of these, and we brought in partners to do, we're doing virtual, all sorts of things, from virtual wine tastings that can be incredibly boring, or they can be really engaging. We've done virtual tours of museums, and if you go in with a video camera and you go from room to room, it's yawn. But if you create educational opportunities, we did a fun one with the Charles Schulz Museum, and they do the Peanuts characters, which is not, that's sort of this outlier in Sonoma County, but it's just kind of understanding what people are looking for and making sure that that virtual experience is engaging and it's fun and it's educational, and it really conveys that unique characteristic of that place or person or whatever you're featuring. And I've seen some terrific videos come out of smaller destinations and some really good ones coming out of larger destinations. But I think it's people are really hungry for things that are both that they can trust and they understand, and it's not so out there strange, but it is creative and fun and engaging, and anybody can do that. It's just a matter of being that, I guess. But you're right, San Francisco's right there. They have a fantastic destination marketing organization, and they've done some great things. But hopefully so too have we in Napa and some of the other more rural destinations.
We do have a question about luxury tourism after the pandemic, and I think when we put our luxury hats on, we think, well, yeah, it can happen in a world-class city like Hong Kong or New York, or it can also happen in the countryside with a beautiful retreat, beautiful setting. So what do you think the prognosis is for food and beverage tourism for the higher end market after this is all over?
In terms of luxury tourism at that end, look, I think it'll bounce back. There's going to be plenty of people out there who still have money, who are still making money. There'll be lots of people who are taking advantage of situations right now who will be in a position to want those luxury experiences. For some, they'll choose to go down that track where they never have before. Because a lot of people coming out of crises like these go, hey, may as well do it now, might not get the opportunity again in the future. So there's that perspective. Like all marketing, I think we have to be aware of who is the target market for whatever it is that we're selling at all the different price points. I mentioned earlier about premiumisation, certainly in the wine industry. It might be a while before people are willing to spend $40, $50 on a bottle of wine when they've just got used to spending $15 to $20 on a bottle of wine and going, hey, that's actually okay. That's pretty good value. So similar sorts of things I can see will potentially happen for the luxury tourism market too. And just back on the VR and AR and virtual side of things, again, we've got to always think, who's the target market for any of these products? Who are we talking to when we create a virtual product versus an augmented reality product? Some people are going to be into that sort of thing. Others most definitely will not. Again, it's an opportunity for us to showcase our products at all levels, from luxury right through to build that desire into the future. And I think that's probably more where these tools can be used now. There's also a chance after all of this, that we'll all be absolutely sick to death of looking at a computer screen and anything on it, and want to get out there into the real world and nature and people and connection, not too close, but connection. And there might be that real flip and bounce back. So I don't think we'll necessarily, any destination, large or small, should rely on virtual anything as a route to market. It's about using it strategically, I think, to build desire for real travel.
Virtual tourism now is just something which we cannot do without, of course, but just to build up the desire. This is it, the first phases of the customer journey, when you raise interest and then you say, oh, that's a trigger in my mind, and when things will go back to normal, I will do this and this and that. Think about the links as regards luxury tourism, but luxury food and beverage tourism with exports. If we are able now, Italy, we have, of course, fashion and food and beverage as the main, so to say, highlights, flagship of exports. If I think about our target markets, for food and wine exports, and I think about that, well, these are the markets I have to focus on, especially in terms of luxury tourism. So come and live the very safe and unique experience of a limited edition that this is just made tailored experience for you and your small group in this bold Borgo, the hilltop village, medieval village, where you can sample freshly made extra virgin olive oil, and then you can also let's say, have, of course, taste whatever you want, but also participate, take part in a hands-on cooking lesson, or maybe a wine tasting, etc. Well, this will be a good path, looking to this kind of across-the-board connections between industries.
You hit the nail on the head with that one. This really small, bespoke experience is going to be, I think, what luxury travel is going to look like for a short, at least for the foreseeable future. That chance for you to travel with people you know and you love, and to create this one-of-a-kind experience is really, I think that's the secret sauce, as we might say, for luxury travel. What we're finding, our research is showing us that we're looking at hotel costs and hotel pricing, and we see over and over again that discounting and deals is not interesting to people. Value is interesting to people. So and that's been the case with the luxury sector too. So I am kind of on a bandwagon now to try and keep our hoteliers from discounting and thinking that they need to be cheapened. They don't. They need to create value, and it's that kind of elevated value in the luxury sector that is going to drive the day. And I think that's fantastic advice, Luisa. That's how I would encourage people to go as well.
Yeah, I've heard some rumors that people are predicting that consumers will start to travel in smaller groups. So rather than a 10 or 12 or 16 person group, even a food group, that they're going to be looking more at 2, 4, 6, which then brings you back to people they know, traveling with a couple, traveling with your family, even if there's kids. And then even when you have those custom groups at that level, then you can have those at any price point.
Yeah, I think you're 100%
Absolutely.
right on that. What we're going to find, and it's going to be concerning for a while, I think, is when you look at those smaller groups, or in our restaurants, they're talking about spacing tables, and in our tasting rooms about limiting the number of people who come in, or spacing them along the bar and the tasting room. So the volume is going to be definitely decreased for our for those restaurateurs and wineries who offer these kinds of experiences. So trying to supplant the volume pricing, what they get from the volume, with what they're offering people and the value they're offering them, and possibly offering that at a higher price so they continue to make their margins, I think is a kind of a profit and loss leader that they're going to have to try and figure out. But that traveling in smaller groups, I think it'll be the law for a while, but I do think that people will feel more comfortable and come away with a more personalized experience.
And Claudia, on top of that personalisation, I think there's also the issue of consumerism. So we've been in a world that's been absolutely frenzied to consumerism. People wanting to more and more. The biggest toys, the best of everything, and willing to spend lots of money on it. We may find coming out the other side of this that people reevaluate what's actually important to them, and that feeds into those comments of yours, Eric and Claudia, about that smaller group travel, and Luisa, what you're saying about sitting on a hilltop and enjoying the views and nature and that bespoke experience. So I think we've got a real opportunity, especially at regional tourism level, to enhance those values, and maybe that will also counter the over-tourism issues in the capital cities, because they can't provide those types of experiences in the same kind of way. So I think what people value and what they're prepared to actually spend their money on might change considerably in the new normal that we will see.
What do you think culinary travel journalists need right now? You know, you think about the bloggers, or you think about actual writers and videographers who might be wooed by the big cities. You know, are the big popular cities going to actually want to try and spend money and woo these journalists there for fam tours? You know, you know, San Francisco is just business as usual. Come on back, everybody. Or do you think that these journalists need more information from smaller destinations? What's your advice?
I think that it will be sort of cross between the two things you said, the balance, because for sure cities, bigger cities, will be trying to, you know, get people, okay, come and read about us, write about us, etc., etc. But for sure, I have been working with our regional government as the, so to say, the guide for press tours from abroad for ages, and they always ask me, give me the unusual, give me something new, give me something nobody wrote about, take me where nobody went. Oh my God, yeah, for sure. But also from the food and wine point of view, and I think that this is where a good match between the needs of those who have something to promote and the needs of those who know how to promote can match. Of course, I need information, but I need a certain type of information. And sometimes smaller destinations are not prepared to deliver this kind of information. I know it may sound absurd, but if you are in the field, and you know, I know that you don't find that absurd, but well, they take good things for granted. Nothing is to be taken for granted. Oh, we have always done like this. No, but tell me the story behind the recipe. Tell me the story behind that meal. Why do you brew beer this way and not that one? Why, etc., etc. And so this is where the culinary journalist can act also as a consultant, as a sort of not supervisor, but let me say, as a professional that can help destination bring out the contents.
They're going to be looking, you know, they follow trends too, and to make sure that we are providing our stories around the trends in hyperlocal travel and all that we've talked about. I think that can also help them, that we're sort of taking a macro view of what travelers are going to want and need, and then layer in the culinary part of that. That helps them make sure that they're kind of spot on with their messaging too, in addition to all the exactly right things that Luisa was talking about with creating these special places that no one's ever been before, and that's what they are. They hunger for that.
We have a question here about, and I think this will be our last question before we wrap things up. And we've talked a lot about whether people are going to come back to bigger destinations, how quickly they will do so, the desire to travel in smaller groups, the desire to maybe stay closer to home and more rural experiences. This question is interesting because this person is asking, what do you advise destinations that are just starting to establish themselves as culinary travel destinations? Brand new, they just thought they know that they have that food and drink product, they're going to start packaging it, and boom, the pandemic hits. What would you be advising them right now?
Well, I would be saying start with the story. What is the genuine, authentic story about your region and your offerings? Who are the people? So think about the people, the place, the heritage, focus on those things, build that really good content and stories, and work out a plan of how you're going to unlock or reveal those stories to the public and the trade and the media, of course, over time. That's going to be, it's like building a house. It's that foundation. Get that foundation right from the beginning. And of course, start locally. So start getting that local interest from the local area, get some local ambassadors, and then move out into more interstate capital cities before moving on to the international. So I think it's that more organic growth that's going to work for regions that are emerging or were beginning to emerge. And we're seeing that already here in Australia with the sorts of things that some of the local journalists are focusing on. And it's really about innovation. They're looking for those stories of how, especially as we come through this particular crisis, how people have overcome adversity, how they've adapted, and how they've actually what they've done differently and how they've come together as a community. So I see community stories being also really important. And just from a practical perspective, this is the time for those regions to gather that wonderful collateral of great video stories, great photography, because imagery, of course, is going to be more important than ever.
Yeah, I think that the issue of focus on your genius loci, your unique selling proposition. Well, I think that ancient Romans hit the point when they say the genius loci, the spirit of the place, which is what makes you unique. Why there? What is authentic? I mean, I know that authentic is something which has become, quite a buzzword, because now everything is authentic and experiential or sustainable, the different decades. So we all have different buzzwords, but find your genius loci and build on that your story. Yes, definitely, which is your story, and build up sort of a storyboard of how this story is to be set out, and then plan, design your communication plan, and find all the fittest media and targets to deliver your plan.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. It's when you build the brand, it's about building the story. It's about identifying your unique value proposition, what your DNA is, what makes that place special, and the people who are in it and their stories. It's not just the story of the place, it's the story of the people and how they've built and how they grow their business and their products and all of that. So this is an ideal time to really hunker down and identify and build a plan and find your partners and figure out what your kind of phased approach is going to be to creating that voice and that point of view. It's an incredibly special time for that destination, and this is a great opportunity to be really thoughtful and take the time to do it right.
Yeah, I think the message is don't give up and don't be discouraged just because the pandemic happened, darn it.
Yeah.
That like you all said, I mean, we are always looking for what's new and different, and we will start traveling again. We've always said that destinations should focus on the faces behind the places, and those are the reasons that people travel. So not just because I can get a great pastry somewhere, but I want to meet the baker who serves and sells that pastry, even if they don't speak my language. I went into a chocolate place in Brussels, Belgium once, and the person they were speaking Flemish, and I don't speak Flemish, and it was a lot of this kind of thing going around. It was hilarious, and we still had a great time. So, but yeah, and focus on the taste of place. That's what food travel is all about. It's the act of traveling for a taste of place to get that sense of place. And I think that it's when you travel, regardless of why you travel, if it's for sightseeing or outdoor recreation or just for your family, always be looking for that taste of place, because that will inspire the direction that you'll take, the path you'll take. Well, I think we should wrap it up for today, but it's been a great first episode of Food Travel Talk TV. I'd like to thank Claudia and Luisa and Robin for sharing your insight. I wish we could talk for hours. And Robin, I think I'd like to open up that bottle of wine behind you.
Oh, yes. Yes. This one's called Ladies Who Shoot Their Lunch.
Oh, dear.
Nice.
Okay.
I'll show you. There we go. Just so you've got a close-up. Great Australian label.
Right. Okay, then. Claudia, do you have a label to compete with that?
I think Carol Shelton's Wild Thing is probably the one I can think of off the top of my head, but I don't know that it competes with that.
Join us next month for our Food Travel Talk TV on May the 15th. And on May the 15th, we're going to be talking about sampling in food and beverage tourism and how that's going to need to change after the pandemic ends. So thank you all for joining today. We appreciate your joining us. And thanks again to our fantastic speakers. And I look forward to seeing you all at a meal sometime soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Bye
Bye-bye.
bye. Ciao.